everyone. Welcome to another fantastic episode of the Boston Greeks podcast. We have a very special episode today. Somebody who is in the thick of it in this time of year with one of the biggest events Boston has to offer. Before we get to our amazing guest, let me bring on my co-host, Foti Stamos. What's up, Foti?
How you doing, Ari?
I'm doing good. I'm excited as usual because today's guest is a good one.
Absolutely. And you mentioned this time of year, we're approaching spring. There's a lot going on this time with like seasons and holidays. Easter's coming up. But for Bostonians, right, because we are Boston based, and we're Greek as well, one of the biggest events that happens in the city happens to be the Boston Marathon.
Wait,
And
what is that? I never heard of this. What
yeah,
what are you
exactly.
talking about?
Well, if you don't know about it, we're going to learn more about it with our special guest, who's a good friend, a mentor, a huge proponent of what we're going to be discussing, and a major super Phil Helene. And
Hmm.
having said that, let's bring on our guest, who's also the president and founder of the 26 Two Point Foundation, Mr. Tim Kilduff. Tim, thank you so much for joining us during this very busy time of the year for you. Welcome.
Well, thank you. It's so happy to be talking with both of you.
uh, we've got a little bit of history together. We've been working with you for the last couple of years side by side, and we can discuss that as we get into the interview. But Tim, it's fascinating to read what we read about your background and your bio. But we want our audience to get a little bit more about who you are and your involvement in the Boston Marathon.
Well, I was introduced to the Boston Marathon back in 1980,
Ooh.
long time ago. At that point, Hopkinton, the start of the race, uh, established a committee, a marathon committee, to work with the BAA. In those days, the BAA and the Boston Marathon was pretty much run by volunteers. There wasn't a
Oh,
huge professional staff. So every year, people would come together and they'd pull this event off, all on a volunteer basis. There were no paid hands. But in 1982, the BAA almost lost their control, their license, if you will, of the Boston Marathon. And it was a long, long process. Started in 82. It took years to work through that. But the bottom line is they almost sold the rights. It
wow.
was a huge, huge upheaval at that point. And back then, there were very, very prominent, the media, the news media, particularly print media, had a lot to say. And they weighed into this subject, and there was a substantial public outcry. And there were reporters, those in the area will remember Will McDonough and others. Every newspaper in the eastern part of Massachusetts had a writer dedicated to running. Um, that's not the case anymore, but that pushed the story out into the public. There was a tremendous upheaval. We were able to stabilize the race in '83 and '84, and it went on with the introduction of John Hancock, who put the marathon in a very different level, if you will, brought it into the modern era. But it was
Mm.
it had there was, we don't want to overstate this, but I can tell you that the Boston Marathon was at risk back in 1982, 83, and 84.
Like, was it like a legitimate fear that this could end, that it would no longer go on? I mean, that I can't even imagine Boston without it.
There was the then president of the BAA had signed the contract without the approval of their board of directors, with an agent, happened to be an attorney, uh, and they would have, if that had persisted, uh, that person would have essentially managed the rights to the Boston Marathon. But the sponsors, then the people, the volunteers, the people who, the Prudential, for example, which is where the race finished, were supplying all kinds of resources to keep the marathon going, really on a non-commercial basis. They all were ready to pull out, and if that had happened, uh, at least for a couple of years, the race was in doubt.
Wow.
Wow. Well, thankfully, it's still here because we enjoy it tremendously because, as Bostonians, when we travel around the world, whenever someone hears about Boston, the marathon always comes up.
Oh,
Always,
absolutely.
always.
Yeah.
So Tim, here yourself, I'm not sure if you mentioned this. Have you ran the marathon?
Uh, I ran it once. I ran it once in 1985. Probably did it all the wrong way. Finished at a reasonable about 3 hours and 30 minutes, something like that. Suffered because I really didn't do what you're supposed to do, and that's prepare properly. But
Uh,
I got through it, and I was in
well,
one piece.
we were going to ask you for some advice because in case Ari and I plan to run it, we need some tips.
We'll set you up with the experts in the field of marathon training. How's that?
Sounds good. Sounds good.
Or I thought that we need a full body transplant before we even think about this.
Oh, pre and post. So Tim, where did the journey then take you to create and establish the 26.2 Foundation?
Well, you both will, and I know your listeners are gonna, they'll understand this. So I know a little bit about organizing and the elements that it took to run a successful marathon, but the emotional piece didn't really set in until I was on the ground in Marathon, Greece. I had a chance to visit. Um, Marathon's a very unique place. Uh, you walk around the beach area and then walk around the Tomb of the Athenians, and you realize what took place there and how important it was to the future of democracy. So you get that sort of feel, and then you walk through the Olympic Stadium, the 1986 Marble Stadium, and you begin to realize there were 100,000 people in that stadium back in 1896. And then, of course, the Boston Athletic Association brought the concept of a marathon to Boston the following years. So that's really that's really for me the pivotal point. And once you do that, it's hard to ignore it, and it's hard to ignore what probably the two of you and your listeners grew up with, and that's a respect and appreciation for Greece, its history, its traditions, all of that sort of stuff. It's pretty exciting, and we wanted to find a way to tie that into sort of a modern expression of that, and that's where the idea of creating an international marathon center started. But that International Marathon Center is not a museum, and it's not a building that's set up to honor the Boston Marathon. The concept is, how do we tie marathoning together on a global perspective? The power that you think about that for a minute, the power and potential of connecting marathoners globally is pretty exciting. Not necessarily easily done, and it's going to take resources. But on the other hand, all of what we're doing has its founding back in 490 BC in the Battle of Marathon. As far as I'm concerned, that's the spiritual beginning of what eventually became the marathon run.
Wow. Is there a number, Tim, of how many marathons are hosted in the US throughout the year?
Well, I can tell you this, that annually on a global basis, roughly 3,000, but that number's on the uptick. And
Wow.
also, there are a lot of marathons or half marathons now. Of course, they're 5K, 10Ks all over the place, but half marathons are becoming very popular. But just think about that, 3,000 on an annual basis, and that increases. There are countries like China, they establish a marathon in a number of countries. There are cities that are 10, 15, 20 million people, and they establish marathons, and they get 30, 40,000 people to participate. So the
Wow.
size and scope of this is pretty impressive. And if we can tie that back, which is the secret, if we can tie that back to its foundings in Greece, boy, pretty powerful.
And hopefully that message that you're mentioning can start from here at some point too.
Well, one of the things that I and I don't mean this in any way to offend anyone,
Hmm.
but one of the things that I think Greek Americans need to do is to project this story outward. I've had the privilege of attending many events, Greek American events, particularly in the Boston area. There's a lot of enthusiasm and excitement and interest, but that story needs to be projected outward. That's really the challenge, particularly in this day and age. And we don't want to necessarily delve too far into politics, but democracy is a often used word. And where was it established? And also the lessons learned from what happened after it was established from Greece. A lot of powerful stories.
Oh yeah. Yes, I totally agree. The outreach is super important, and I think in the era that we live today, thankfully to technology, we should be applying that outreach so that more people understand what's going on.
And I just want to add that uh, so there's I'm going to tie this into our next kind of question here, and that's uh, this amazing, truly like it gets right into your soul. This ceremony that we hold, um, and as a Bostonian, my whole life, I wasn't fully aware of what was going on behind the scenes leading up to the marathon. I just always knew the marathon happened. It's a great thing for Boston. Everybody has their Boston pride, Boston Marathon pride. But there is an amazing event leading into this that until a couple of years ago I wasn't fully aware of, and you guys kind of brought me in and told me about it, and then I attended, and I was just blown away. And I just feel like this is, as you said, Tim, we have to project more. We have to get, this word out and this connection out. And this ceremony is something that I feel like everybody and anybody who is aware of it, or who would attend or would see it on social media or on the news or wherever, would be like completely blown away as I was.
Mm. And, having said that, Ari, I think this is a good lead into discussing and having Tim talk about in more detail about the wreath ceremony for the Boston Marathon.
Well, it really has deep emotional ties. A lot of what the impetus for creating any kind of ceremony goes back to 1946 and the Stellianos Karakides, who won the 1946 Boston Marathon. Stellianos Karakides and his family survived the Nazi occupation of Greece. He came to Boston, and Greece was in tough straits at that point. He came to the United States, the objective to win and raise awareness to what was happening in Greece after the Nazi occupation. He wins the race in the last mile in a very exciting fashion, beating Johnny Kelly, who was at that time probably the most preeminent marathoner in the world. But he stayed in the United States and raised awareness and funds to be brought back to Greece. When he went back when he went back home, he was greeted by 1 million people in the streets of Athens. So that's sort of the emotional underpinning here. In 1910, Dimitri Karakides, Stellianos' son, brought to the United States for the first time gold olive wreaths. They are actually fashioned from olive branches taken from olive trees in Marathon, Greece. There's a manufacturing process, and they're ultimately coated in gold. Those now, since 2010, with the help of the Consul General of Greece in Boston, the Alpha Omega Council, and the 26.2 Foundation, presents those olive wreaths to the Boston Athletic Association, and it's become an annual ceremony, and I would say now an annual tradition.
Mm.
In the Boston, when you think about this, having actual olive wreaths that are fashioned from from Marathon Greece, placed on the heads of the Boston Marathon winners, I think it's pretty significant.
It is amazing. And this is why, I kind of led into this the way I did because I am such a like proud Greek, all these things. I'm a proud Bostonian. And when I first attended the ceremony, Foti was telling me about it, and I was just like, this is the coolest thing. I mean, it really, really is. It's truly like a moving experience. And to see them and to know where they came from and to see the effort that the runners put in and the winner is crowned, it's the experience. I can't even put into words. I mean, people really need to see this, in person, if not on a screen somewhere, but they need to see it.
Well, we all collectively, all of us that are interested, we need to work hard at again projecting this story outward. The gold wreaths are put on the heads of the winners by the mayor of the city of Boston, the governor of Massachusetts. It's pretty significant. It gets a lot of visibility, but unless we work really, really hard, the story, the historical nature of the story gets lost. So it's more than a 1 day a year story. We have to collectively work at this.
100% true. 100% true. Because the more that people know about this, the more they'll understand like the depth and the weight that this ceremony and the meaning behind it has. Because it's so cool. I love being discovering, something that I wasn't aware of, and then I was like, this is happening, and I really didn't know, and it hits all the right check boxes because like I'm Greek, so I have this like kind of Greek pride with the Greek history. I'm a Bostonian, and the Boston Marathon is like one of the biggest events in Boston, and these two passions and pride points of mine, intersect right there, and I was like, this is like one of the coolest things I've ever seen.
Well, this year, for example, the wreath ceremony will be held the Thursday before the marathon weekend. Um, and there'll be in addition to passing on, if you will, and by the way, the wreaths are presented by the Consul General to the BAA on behalf of the people of Greece. That's another one little tagline that sometimes gets lost. In addition, it honors Stelianos Kyriakides' 1946 Boston Marathon. But this year is full of anniversaries, two of which Bill Rogers, who is preeminent marathoner, known worldwide. He won his first Boston Marathon in 1975. Bobby Hall fought tooth and nail, and ultimately 50 years ago was allowed to cover the course in a wheelchair. And that ultimately led to the establishment of the wheelchair division in Boston. Those are two pretty significant milestones in the race. And that they'll be part of this year's wreath ceremony. So you can see the story goes on and on and on. It's really never ending.
And this year's ceremony is going to be in a very interesting, special place as we've hosted in the past. You want to speak a little bit about the actual event that's going to occur?
Well, and Foti, I want you to jump in because I know you're very familiar with this site, but the wreath ceremony will be held in a place called The View, which is on the 52nd floor of the Prudential Center. The significance of that is the wreaths will be handed over in an absolutely beautiful environment overlooking Boylston Street and the finish of the Boston Marathon.
Yeah.
So it's going to be pretty spectacular, but I know you're familiar with that location.
Yes, I mean, as far as you just mentioned, the spectacular view will tie in with the spectacular energy of the event, the emotional part of it, the the wonderful people that will be attending, representing this year's ceremony. Um, for those that are listening, if you haven't been to the view, now that it's open, recommend visiting so that you can see and capture this moment and energy that's up there.
The views
Spectacular.
the view is the old top of the hub. Is that what it is?
Yes.
Correct. Correct. Made into a very beautiful space, beautiful venue. You have a 360-degree view of the city of Boston, and as Tim had mentioned, there's one section that is overlooking the finish line on Boylston Street.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. Tim, this has been a great time to get to speak with you a little more intimately. Usually we're in meetings, Zoom meetings. There's a bunch of guys just yapping away, trying to put this together. But our efforts collectively, we push and push and we get things done, even though sometimes it comes down to the wire. But we're looking forward to being at the event with you as well. We look forward to the progression of the 26.2 Foundation out in Hopkinton. You've got, an enormous vision there, which, we're excited to hear as this progresses as well. Any last minute thoughts you want to share with us, Tim?
No, I appreciate what the two of you are doing here. This gets to that projecting and telling stories outwardly. So that's really important. I would encourage you to keep doing that. If there's a way we can help you build your audience, we're more than happy to do that. But I applaud you.
Thank you.
And I would also add one thing. We do this collectively. There are a number of people that have their hands in the ceremony, but in large part driven by the Alpha Omega Society along with the foundation. But the tie-in with the Consul General of Greece in Boston adds a very different element, an official element, if you will. The current Consul General, Simeon Tagos, has taken on not just a high level of interest, but he gets it, if you will. He sees the power of the stories here, and he's been very helpful. So thank you both, and keep up the good work. Let us know how we can support you.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Ari, I hope you've been inspired to at least give it a
Well, let me say this. I said everything I said earlier, but Tim, truly, what you're doing is, you may not be in the limelight and showered with praise constantly because you're like in the background, but you are literally one of those people that are making things happen that, if these things disappeared, people will be like, hey, well, these are things that people take for granted because we're just kind of accustomed to it. But it's the guys like you behind the scenes that really, this is what makes Boston proud. This is what makes us as Greeks proud. Like, this is such an important thing, and it's through your hard work, and we appreciate what you do. And we want to, whatever we can do, work together. That's what we believe in. We believe in everybody coming together to execute these great projects and ideas. And you're one of those guys that from the day I met you, I was like, this guy gets it. I have full faith that everything will go forward with people like you behind the scenes. So thank you for that.
Well, you're very welcome. You're very kind. So we're going to keep advancing this.
We are. And we want to say thank you so much, Tim, taking the time with us. Thank you, Forty, as always. And thanks everybody out there for watching and listening. We appreciate you. And, all you Bostonians out there, you know what to do for the marathon. Get out there, support, have fun, enjoy, and learn about these fantastic stories that are behind the scenes and in front of the scenes. And if you haven't heard about, the wreath ceremony and all this, it is one of the coolest things I've seen in Boston. So make sure in every way you can get out there, support, watch, social media, whatever it is, just do it. It's really cool. And thanks everybody out there. Thank you, Tim. Thank you, Forty. And we'll see you next time.